Welcome back. My next guest on the program is Mr. Bismarck Rewani, the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company. We'll be taking a look at some of the issues that have come up in the business space. Of course, these are issues that have dominated conversations for a very long time, so they're not new. Talking about doing business in Nigeria, we'll be assessing the new economic realities in Nigeria, the role of the regulators, and of course expectation as we start 2017. We're going, of course, coasting in to the last few days in the year of 2016 and in the month of December. Good morning to you, Mr. Rewani. Thank you for coming on the program.
Good morning.
So let's start first of all with taking a look at some of the issues that will be coming up this week. This week, the President will be presenting the 2017 budget to a joint sitting of the National Assembly, and the projection is 7.28 trillion naira for 2017. We have a benchmark of $42 for oil, $42.50, and 2.2 million barrels per day, crude oil production output, and then 290 naira to a dollar.
Okay, now let's face the reality. There's a new economic reality, and you're going to hear everything the government is going to do. The President is going to present the budget on Wednesday. Is shooting for 7 trillion naira, which is 20% above the 6 trillion naira last year. But if you take it in dollar terms, which is the realistic assumption, if you divide 7.2 trillion by 305, which is the IFM rate as of Friday, and you take 6 trillion naira last year and divided by 199, which was the exchange rate last year. In dollar terms, 7 trillion naira is actually a 25% contraction in economic activity. In other words, you need to increase that 7 trillion naira by another 25% to get to zero before you now add some more to have a stimulus package. But it's a movement in the right direction, but we shouldn't be deceived by the fact that 7 trillion naira is a large amount, because last year you were buying rice at 11,000 naira a bag. This year you're buying it at 24,000 naira a bag. So you've got to look at how much can 7 trillion buy this year compared to how much 6 trillion could buy last year.
But then you see, taking a look at it, it seems that there's also been an increase in capital expenditure as against the current expenditure, still in line with the federal government's plan to reflate the economy through spending.
Absolutely. The composition of the budget. Don't forget, last year budget accomplishment was low. There was all this hula baloo about padding and all of that rubbish. This year, the Senate President said, look, based on the discussions he's had with the President, we should have an easy passage as long as the numbers make sense. So there's alignment and consensus between the legislature and the executive. The President also is focused on the fact that there will be increased capital expenditure, there will be increased social intervention to make sure that these things, you can have some relief, because the Nigerian masses are actually under pressure. They're suffering. There's higher unemployment, higher underemployment, there's high inflation, there's power supply issues, there's infrastructure gaps, and in fact, as a matter of fact, there is a higher level of misery in the country, and that is the reality. And people don't want excuses, they want results.
And because people want results, we're taking a look now at the business environment. The federal government, since it came into power, has been talking about improving the ease of doing business through various reforms. The Vice President has continued to champion that. But what's your assessment of regulatory environment? Because that is very key in successfully getting your business environment to be conducive enough to attract investment.
Now, what the slides you will show very soon pointing at is the government says what it's going to do. These slides are going to focus on what the government must not do, the negative things that must not be done. So we look at what they call the combative regulatory environment as against a collaborative regulatory environment. What we had in 2015, 2014, and 2016 was a combative regulatory environment. We had the slightest infraction, if at all there was an infraction, at the slightest perception of anything, is a fine, punitive fines were slapped on, which not only disincentivized, punished whoever the infractor was, but also actually discouraged other investors from coming in. This economy is going to achieve its potential, one, by government spending, but more important, by domestic and international investment. If you look at foreign direct investment has declined all the way from a high of about $8 billion about 4 or 5 years ago, down to about $1.6 billion, and it's going to go negative. Now, what is it? Why is this happening at a time when you have 180 million population, you have unemployed resources, you have an oil-based economy, you have LNG, you have solid minerals? Why is this not happening? Why are we suboptimal in our performance? Why are we performing below par? Now, the reason is simple. Punishments are supposed to discourage deviant behavior, and also to encourage positive behavior. Now, what has happened if you look at what has happened, let us take the case of the telecom industry, right? You have a situation where a company had an infraction. And we didn't say give a slap on the wrist. The perception of MTN was arrogant, predatory, exploitative and all that, which is probably all wrong. But then 5 million subscribers were not registered at the appropriate time. They did not take steps in time. And then you slap them with a $5 billion, 7 years or 8 years of their profitability, 5 times their capital and all that. Basically, you can either punish or have a death penalty.
So what kind of
this was a death penalty.
What type of penalties do you favor?
No, penalties that can be inclusive. If you say, for example, you cannot repatriate dividend for the next 3-4 years, you have to reinvest the money and create jobs, right? You have to do this. You have to invest in network. You have to upgrade the quality of what you're doing. The company feels the pain, but at the same time, the country gets the benefit. But what you're doing right now is to slap a fine, which is to a large extent arbitrary. Not only that, let us take that MTN in one case. Let us take a brewing company like Guinness. NAFDAC says that you kept your things in a store, which was a store that you leased from somebody and said expired drugs, or they found some rodents and all of that for some raw materials, which was in any case false. Slapped a 2 billion naira fine. Distorted everything. And this company was in the process of bringing in £100 million of increased equity at the same time when you did that. Take a look at Standard Chartered. Slapped with a fine of 1.8 billion naira for rules that are far from clear, right? And we don't know what happened, but that's work in progress.
So
take a look at IBTC Stanbic, cannot publish the results. And now you go further, and MTN now is being harassed for a supposed
So, Mr.
Rwani,
looking at how all of these regulators have behaved, from the telecom sector to the health sector, no one seems to have, been spared. What does this tell us about our regulatory environment?
It is too combative. And it's like, in the US, they have what we call entrapment. As distinct from when you check for things and see that things are wrong. So those who have not invested say that those who have invested in this country, and let us take the data as they show, the investments so far, MTN, $12 billion in research and development expended in this period, $12 billion. Employs over 2,500 people, direct, and so many other people. Spent over 16 billion naira on the foundation, right? And have, God knows, about 60 million subscribers, right? And now are going further. What license payment was only $435 million when they came in. Now you get to a point where you say a company that is registered, which is listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the ADRs are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, they sign up to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Then you say this company was repatriating money out of the country without proper documentation. How is that possible? It's such a fairy tale. So you look at that. The regulators should not, or government agencies should not engage in rumor peddling and all of that as a way of trying to bring people down. The same thing happened. It has happened in the banking sector. It has happened in fast-moving consumer goods. It has happened even in healthcare. So I'm saying let us have a more collaborative environment where you sit down with the operators and say, look, what is it that you want to do? Okay, you must go and list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, do that. You must increase your employment by doing this. You must do that. You can bring in some of your partners when you use in other parts of the world. Let us say, for example, MTN, you're sponsoring Zambia and football in Zambia. You must assist the Nigerian Football Federation, which is struggling even to pay its coach. So see what you can do about that. I'm sure those companies will be most willing to do that as long as they are encouraged to see that they have a much more consistent, stable, and predictable environment.
But what is the role of government and the National Assembly in all of this? They definitely do have a role.
The government, National Assembly is part of the government. The legislators are to make laws and have an oversight responsibility. The federal government is to ensure that regulators, they put the rules and ensure that the people comply. The market determines pricing. So what you have seen, what you are going to see in 2017 is that the regulators' roles will be clearly defined and delineated from those are the markets. The foreign exchange policy, for example, in Nigeria, the policy is good. The implementation itself is up in the air, right? We hear that there are, God knows how many rates there are. So what you are going to see in 2017